Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
I know today across the country is a day to reflect and remember for all of us. But I can only imagine what it means for families like yours who lost a loved one, you, your brother, a New York City police officer. Do you ever really learn to deal with this?
Yes, because you have no choice but to deal with it. When this first happened, I thought a long time about if he was recovered, what it would take for me to actually go through with the service. And I talked to my wife about it and talked to a bunch of people about it and decided that, I'm not going to go to the doctor and get drugs to medicate myself for it. I'm just going to stand there and be a man. And that's what I did. And I feel good about that decision. It was very heart-wrenching, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. It was devastating. But deep down inside of me, I gained the strength to go ahead and do it. And then move the family forward thereafter. There was a tomorrow. There is a today that we had lived for, that he wanted us to live for.
Yes, and talk about fate. Your brother wasn't supposed to be off that day, wasn't he?
He was. He just purchased a house, and he had invited us all out to help him paint. I think my last communication with my brother Walter was the Saturday before Tuesday, then on 9/11, and he had called me and just said, "Look, we're getting together next weekend to paint my house. Mm-hmm. I'm calling in sick on a weekend, and I'm going to work this week instead, one of the days this week." And that day happened to be 9/11, and it was fate, and I have to rest assured that that's just how God wanted this to work out.
It was really, when you look at the day, the images are still so vivid. The smoke, the chaos. When did you actually find out that he was there?
It took a long time to find out because I was there myself that morning. I would take the E train from Penn Station down to the World Trade Center and walk to the Stock Exchange, which is where I worked. And I was in the building for about 20 minutes when the first plane hit in the Stock Exchange building. So I missed that by about 20 minutes. And then after we realized when the second plane hit that it wasn't an accident, it wasn't a tiny little Cessna, there's bad things happening in the city today, we decided to shut down shop. There was Mayor Giuliani at the time, made the call for everyone to go home. And on my way home, at this point, I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. I was more concerned about getting home without a delay in my commute, because commute from New York City to where I lived was an hour regular. With congestion, it would probably be 2 or 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So my concern was just simply not to wait in traffic. So I hopped on the J train, which is right under New York Stock Exchange, and it cuts through the World Trade Center. And I was on the J train. We were in progress, and about 20 minutes later, I was in around Jamaica Station, and we had realized that the towers fell. And after that, I realized many months after that the tubes I were in got crushed by the towers falling. So it was, for me, I'm just calling my family to let them know I'm alive, because we lost all communications. The electricity went out in our building. The lights the lights went out. The windows blew out. So my family was worried about me, and I said, well, let me just give Walter a call and find out where he is. And no response on his cell phone, but to be expected, because he's busy. He's down at the site helping people, probably. That's what he did. And we eventually called the precinct where he worked, which was the Emergency Services Unit, Truck 3. And they said, look, we have no communications. We don't know who's down there or what's going on now. It's kind of a gray area with them as well. I'm sure we'll hear from him. When we do, let me take your name and number, and I'll call you back. And we waited. Later on that night, 9, 10 o'clock at night, now the family's really getting nervous. Kept calling. Again, they had no response. Wow. I think it took me an honest 3 days to realize that he was taken away from us that day. But you had to hold out for hope, too, at the same token. But after not hearing for 3 days, it got escalated at the NYPD to a much higher level, much higher risk. And that's when, we started talking about, what the fate could have been and ultimately what it turned out to be. So I would say the family took us about 3 days to figure out what had really happened.
Sounds like your brother loved his job, though.
He loved it. And I'll tell you what, he was the type of guy, if he knew the outcome and there was still something that needed him, he'd go back in. Mm-hmm. Now, his communication was last heard from his unit They were on the 6th floor of the North Tower, I believe, and they refused orders to evacuate because they were trying to help civilians trapped in an elevator. So he died doing what he loved doing. He died, being a man of God. What would Jesus do? One of those things. That's exactly how he died. So that helped give me closure, and that helped me understand the situation a little bit better, that it was fate. That's how God wanted it. That's how it turned out to be.
Yeah. I mean, it really is an amazing situation for so many families like yours. And there are memorials today, and we're all trying to, do what we can to remember and reflect. But does it concern you that it is too easy for people to forget?
It does. And you know what? I liken it to, I suppose, the federal buildings that were bombed too. A lot of people that are removed from that immediate situation, it's a lot easier for them to forget about. Now, there's not a red-blooded New Yorker in New York right now that has forgot about it, but perhaps some other states have where they weren't as affected as we were,
Yeah. And two, I think it is, we had the attack, and we've been pretty darn lucky because we haven't had another.
Well, I think you could thank President Bush and his administration for that. He laid the foundation out for a safer, more secure America. Not to mention he laid the foundation out for ultimately taking the life of the person that was partly responsible for this, Osama bin Laden. And you could thank all the hard work that he put in, that Giuliani put in, that a lot of politicians then put in, who are now forgotten about. But those are the people that made America safer.
Mm-hmm. And your brother, too, and so many of the other people who gave their lives that day. But, the search crews actually found your brother's firearm at Ground Zero.
That they did. It turns out to be one of his best friends, who is also an NYPD cop, too. What they did is they took all the rubble out of the World Trade Center, and they transported it to the Staten Island dump. And my brother's friend was in charge of sorting through, well, not charge of, but he was part of the committee who was sorting through to find anything from a civilian to a fireman to a cop, personal effects, badges, wallets, anything like that. And unbeknownst to him, he had found my brother's gun. And it wasn't his duty gun. His duty gun was the Glock. One would assume the polymer composition that it wouldn't have survived. But they did find his Smith, the revolver, Smith & Wesson, .38 revolver. I believe he kept it on his ankle. I'm not really sure, but they found that, and it was in horrible shape. It was bent. It was brown. It was black. It was distorted. So the NYPD put it in a better shape than it was in. They kind of straightened it out, and they put it in a display case, and they gave it to my dad. And it sat in my dad's house for about a year. He gave it to me. It sat in my house for about a year. And I called him up, and I said, Dad, I can't help but think there's something that we need to do with this gun. And I don't mean selling it or anything silly like that. I mean, America needs to see what this gun looks like to understand what Walter went through and these other people went for. And I forget how I reached out to the NRA in general, and they quickly put me in touch with, I think it was Wayne LaPierre or Millie Howell, and we just discussed things going forward. They were very concerned, obviously. They weren't worried about the gun or anything like that, but time had passed, and Wayne LaPierre actually came to my brother's funeral service, and I remember seeing him there, and that was, he's just an outstanding gentleman. Mm-hmm. So we started talking. I said, Wayne, I got this gun here. I know you have a firearm museum. Well, what do you say I donate it to the NRA Firearm Museum? And he thought it was an outstanding idea. Everyone did. And it turns out at one of the annual meetings, I donated the gun. And it's one of their, I guess, treasured possessions in that museum now. I hear a lot of good things about that exhibit.
Well, and I think it's there for good reason, and I think it will make people never forget, which they shouldn't do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time. How are you going to spend today?
You're welcome for the time. Any time that you guys need me, I'm here. I'm spending today as a family day. I chose a while back not to go to any more memorials because, not for any other reason other than I just want it to be a family day to remember Walter and to love the family I have now. My kids are coming home from school. I think I'm going to take my son fishing, and we're just going to hang out and probably watch TV, and nothing really special. I called my mom, I called my other brother, and just touch base with family members. I've been fielding a lot of Facebook text, a lot on my wall, a lot of texts on the phone, and the people that came out in support of the family to this day, it's outstanding, and that really does help us cope. So
Yeah, and
I
you
guess to
told me
sum it up, a
something
family
else.
day.
I'm sorry?
I guess to sum it up, just a low-key family day, somber day. The sky on 9/11 on that Tuesday morning was so clear and peaceful, calm and serene, right before the attacks happened. And I remember looking up at the sky when I was walking to the stock exchange and just appreciating how beautiful it was. And many 9/11s thereafter, I do the same thing. And today, it reminds me, the sky reminds
Yes.
me of exactly how it did. Very peaceful, calm, and serene. And the sky is just something that I've always noticed about 9/11 and always compare other 9/11s to it.